Hey, coaches. I'm excited today to get into cognitive behavioral coaching. Ever since Dr. Beck's work around cognitive behavioral therapy, the ability to support behavior change using exploration around the thoughts and emotions and behaviors and the physiological responses that people have due to the emotions and thoughts that they have. That exploration around the interconnection between each of those factors has led to wonderful advancements in the fields of psychology and therapy and also coaching. With our work here today, we are taking some of the concepts this week and next session. We're taking some of the concepts from cognitive behavioral work and seeing how they apply to coaching. Of course, that distinction between therapy and coaching is always going to be the same. We are talking about someone who is healthy and who is ready to continue to move forward and be stretched and even increase stress to that optimal level. And yet, there is still, even though cognitive behavioral therapy really kicked things off with Dr. Beck's work, many of those concepts, tools, lines of questioning, all can be pulled into the space of coaching to support behavior change coupled with awareness building and really emotional regulation, all combined for overall life development. This is why it's at the very tail end of the entire experience, because as you look at cognitive behavioral coaching, in many ways, it is allowing the coach to go deeper with the client in a way that reflects more of an MCC, Master Certified Coach, approach. To see that every challenge, every frustration, every agenda that the client would like to work on is always related to the interconnection between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors to some degree. Now, it doesn't mean that we are going to always use some form of a CBC or CBT related tool or framework. But in every coaching session, the client or the coach follows the client's agenda and makes sure that client is growing, and the questions, the tools, the concepts from cognitive behavioral work really do focus on that deeper dive. CBC is just like CBT. It is all about that interconnection between what am I thinking, or what were my thoughts? What might my thoughts be? And how do those thoughts impact the emotions? And how do those emotions impact the behavior? And depending on the model you're looking at, also, how do each of these show up in my physiological response? When I'm standing on stage and I gave the presentation and I bombed, what was I saying? What happened in my body? And what was I feeling? And what were those source, foundational thoughts that were going through my mind in that moment? It's not necessarily that we have a step-by-step process of thoughts, then emotions, then behavior. Oftentimes, that is the case because our actions come from within. Whether or not we are using System 1 or System 2 thinking, it's always trained from within, even if the response of System 1 thinking is so fast from Daniel Kahneman's work. But there is value in exploring the ability to impact emotions through behavior. When we smile, that's not the real smile, but when we actually smile, it changes us and it changes our ability to think more broadly. Everything that we've talked about from so many other sessions, from PERMA back, is related to the work that we can do as we use a more cognitive behavioral model. So similar to PERMA, CBC is a way to look at our overall coaching approach, and yet there are a great number of tools from CBC or CBT, whichever, that can be brought into coaching. Now, of course, if you look up cognitive behavioral tools, you will often find similar types of tools, daily thought journals, and ABC activities, and so on, that are tailored towards those with depression, those with severe anxiety, those who might be wanting to get out of an addiction or need to explore the elements of that addiction. And that's not the work we're doing. And yet those same models, like I just said, you'll find it's the same kind of model with slightly different questions as the therapist is working with someone with depression or someone with severe anxiety and so on. So again, the coach is able to look at those tools, look at those resources, and to pull them into the coaching space for open exploration, because the client is in that space of health. They are capable, they are ready to explore. And the coach is challenging them to take a look at themselves holistically in the problem they're wanting to solve, in the opportunity they want to reach for, in that area of development they want, or as they're stretching towards overall life wellness. We take that holistic approach of cognitive behavioral work, shine the light on these different areas and the interconnections, and I mean it, there is amazing learning that can be had. And the fun thing is the client gets to absorb that model. You can do some quick education around the idea of thoughts impact emotions, impact behavior, and that is something the client can also take with them easily into their own lives. Now, when would you do more of a directly related cognitive behavioral tool or framework, maybe introducing thoughts, emotions, behavior, that triangle, or the diamond if you're also including physiological responses? Well, it could be around any kind of behavior change. Hey, this just happened and I want to do better next time, or this keeps happening. I want to deal with this pattern. Of course, habit change is a part of that. And what we've talked about with habit formation, we can bring that in to the picture. The CBC work would start at the core, though. It would be the building of self-awareness in order to be ready to do new habit development. So this could be a bit of a precursor that we bring in to talk about the interconnection between thoughts, emotions, and behavior, and then use that model to help do the mapping, to help do the studying of what's really going on in the inside as I am getting ready for this behavior, or as I'm doing the thing that I want to change. What is going on in the inside? And then from that learning, we can better design the triggering event, make different decisions about that activation or trigger event. We can make a different routine for ourselves and so on. So this is a great thing to pull in for habit formation. It's just a great thing to pull in for anything related to behavioral state, the thoughts that we're thinking, and the impact that has on how we're showing up, and maybe that, again, the emotional regulation. Now, what might we offer within a coaching session? One option that I'd like to get into in a little bit more detail with this particular video, although there's, again, many, many different resources and tools that you can dig into. It's one of the videos that is on this week's content, is to explore some different options. But ABC, or ABCD, is a great tool to bring into coaching for open exploration in order to create that stepping back, looking at ourselves and our patterns for a bit, and then making different developmental decisions around that new learning. So let's take a look at that model for a little bit here. And it starts with A, activation. Now, with each of these, I'm going to have some different questions available. You can kind of copy the slide deck like normal. You can just trim it down to just this list of questions, or you can include the options of tools or resources that you can offer as you follow up with each element of ABC. But it stands for activation, beliefs, and consequence. We'll get to the D in a bit. Activation is the simple thing. What happened? When did it happen? Where did it happen? Who were you with when it happened? You're just exploring, putting on the table the triggering event. Similar to what we've done with habit formation, we're just taking a moment to say, what happened? Now, there is something that's valuable in doing this. You can help them get to the core if you are working with a client and they embellish with their interpretation, which is a fact, that their interpretation of what happened is a fact, that is the filter that they were using, but that fact is separate from the reality of just simply what happened. So if someone cut me off in traffic and I say, what happened? Or I'm asked what happened, I might say some jerk must have been having a bad day and they cut me off in traffic. The cut me off in traffic is the thing that happened. And then we also hear that embellishment, that interpretation. As a coach, you might challenge and say, hey, the way this exploration works is we can begin separating, teasing apart the actual trigger in its simplest form, and then also take into account that interpretation. And so we will be doing that in this next thing, and that leads to beliefs or assumptions. Now, if we're going to continue the ABC, then we need to stick with beliefs. But there's that slight distinction between beliefs and assumptions. Oftentimes, the assumptions are something we carry along based on previous experiences with something lighter or simpler, maybe, where beliefs might be very firmly long-term held things, beliefs that we truly believe in. But that's where the interpretation piece comes in. What do you believe about what happened? What did you think in the moment? What were you assuming about that person or the scenario, the situation? What do you believe about yourself in that kind of scenario? And what assumptions might have been strengthened by what actually happened? And then we move into consequence. That's a pretty strong word for what happened next. But consequence really fits the ability to make it an ABC. So we're going to go with consequence. What happened next? What happened as a result of those emotions? What happened as a result of that interpretation? What did these emotions lead to? What choice did you make in that moment? How did you behave differently, or do you behave differently because of that experience or this kind of experience? How well is this behavior working for you? And that's, you can hear that tone. It's switching over to moving things forward for open exploration that often might lead to, well, it's not working very well. Clearly, it's a bit of one of those challenging. It could even be a little bit didactic. We want to be careful about it. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel this is accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish? How would you rate your reaction or response on a scale of 1 to 10, and so on? So A, B, C, activating event, the trigger. B for beliefs and assumptions. C for consequence, or just simply what happened next. And then what? Well, as with any tool or framework, it is simply good to pause and explore. And that leads us to D. And oftentimes in a cognitive behavioral therapy work, and even in CBC, the D might be the disputation, the dispute, the disagreement we have with ourselves or that process, or especially the thinking that we had, the beliefs and the assumptions, where we rise the counterpoints to what we said to ourselves in that moment. It can be very useful to take that approach. But from a coaching standpoint, one of the biggest distinctions between cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral coaching is that we would be less directive in the coaching approach. We would defer far more to the client in a cognitive behavioral coaching framework. I do want to be very, very clear, though, that oftentimes, the majority of the time, a cognitive behavioral therapist will be high partnership, high deferring in comparison to maybe other modalities in therapy. It is a heavy partnership focused type of approach. But with someone who's really struggling with depression or anxiety and other challenges, there is often the ability for the therapist to be a bit more hands-on and directive and offering more psychoeducation and so on. Whereas in coaching, the coach is able to just say, hey, so there's this thing, ABC, here's how it works. On the next thing is where we look at your development. What did you notice as you explored these 3 steps? What is true? What is not true? If you could go back and talk to yourself in that moment, what else might you highlight for yourself? What other facts would you want to bring to your attention in that moment? As you look ahead to that meeting that's happening next week, what words do you want to take from right now and use in the moment? Remember as you step on the stage. What options do you have around that type of activating event or that triggering person or team? What options are there to switch the A? What do you You need to address what do you need in order to address your beliefs? What support do you need? What do you need to learn? What do you need to look into? Who do you need to have a conversation with in order to dispute, explore, weigh your beliefs? And what would your ideal what happened next or consequence be? What would you like to have if you could replay that, or as you play it again this next week, what do you want to have happen? D is really coaching as we go into an ABCD model. And we're truly just putting the client in the driver's seat to give them the ability to speak to themselves, speak to their own triangle of thoughts and emotions and behaviors, the activation leading into their routine of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and then what happened next. We just highlight what's going on and we hand it back to them for learning and decision making. Now, this model is very useful in terms of supporting overall decision making, overall preparedness for the next time we do that kind of thing, and development, building of confidence and motivation. And next, we're going to take a little bit of time to look at some tools or resources we can offer if the client is highlighting, I really want to work on the activation, or I want to work on the beliefs, or I really need to figure out how to do it differently next time with the consequence. So we're going to just take a little bit of time to look at related tools or resources. Let's take a look at these. It's similar to the menu we were building with PERMA, and now we're bringing it in to ABC. So activation options, we already said studying and mapping. That part of habit frameworks is great to bring in for a deeper dive into the activating events, the triggering, emotional intelligence exploration, decision-making in order to choose whether or not we want to avoid or change that activating event. In many ways, this is around a person, a group, an organization, a setting, where the client might be thinking of a pretty drastic change. We can use a decision-making framework to bring more of the whole person, the entire being of the client into the picture as they make that decision. And then crucial conversations. If they do need to have a conversation in order to change that activating event, well, we can offer that. Now for beliefs. Mindset exploration and growth mindset exploration, these two make a lot of sense. So you can go back to those lessons and dig in there. Thinking fast and slow, using that framework can also help. These are very much related, as well as the emotional intelligence. Digging into our thoughts, emotions, and how those impact our behaviors. And that leads us to happiness. The ability to look at the positives, the silver lining, the gratitude, the things that we appreciate even in the midst of the challenge. And a daily thought record, something we're going to be exercising between this session and next, where as a result of the coaching you're going to be getting this week, you're going to take just a little bit of time each day to write down thoughts around the thing that you want to change, or just the 2 or 3 high points of your day, the thoughts that were going through your mind, the emotions that you experienced, and what you did differently because of those high points. So more of a, not necessarily gratitude, but being mindful of the most positive experiences. Daily thought records, daily thought journals, they come in a lot of different flavors. We'll have more content on it for next week. But that's one of the little exercises that we'll do. And so that's why it's listed here. It's going to be in next week's or next session's content. And then we look at consequence. We can look at just simply exploring the costs and benefits of the resulting behavior. We could consider the costs and benefits of if we took the total opposite behavior. If we were the kind of person who, when we were in a meeting, we never spoke up, well, what is it like to never speak up? What costs are there? What benefits are there? And what is the cost and benefits of always speaking up and being mindful of that? Where do we want to be? We can just take some time to rate ourselves and determine where we want to be in terms of that behavior, and especially in terms of the costs and benefits of that behavior. We can look at the psychological safety cycle, something we're going to save up for next week. So that will be a part of the picture next week. It's about the interaction between other people's thoughts, emotions, and behavioral cycles based on our thoughts, emotions, behavioral cycle. Then habit development, taking it from studying and mapping over to exploring and building and sustaining new habits. And goal setting, maybe conversational frameworks, especially if we're wanting to remember something in the moment, if we need to request support. There are so many different tools that we can leverage. Again, all that we've done so far touches these cognitive behavioral models. The main thing that you want to remember is there's value in the overall exploration of thinking, emotions, and the impact these have on our behaviors, and the impact our behaviors have on our emotions and our thinking. So that even if the client comes and says, hey, I just want to solve blank problem today, we can always keep in mind that is an entire person in front of me. And they're a bundle, a tangle of thinking, of feeling, and doing. And we can help them solve that problem by just getting a simple solution based on our thinking, or we can help them create a solution from a deep core of healthy mindfulness around their thoughts, their emotions, and their behaviors that they want to mindfully choose. Thank you for taking on this work. This is the work you have been doing and will be doing for the rest of your time as a coach. It is the deep, meaningful work of transformation. Thank you for coaching.